well, I also looked at it in its totality because I saw the Catholic bishops going on 60 Minutes and talking about how upset they were that the illegal aliens are being deported and that they're not filling the pews anymore. And yet they have this moral outrage for ICE and Tom Homan and President Trump because he's actually enforcing the border.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. So glad you decided to pull up a chair for this one. So Piers Morgan sits down a panel that could not be more loaded. You've got Jack Posobiec, who walks in and refuses to play along with the idea that the president is some unraveling figure. Across from him, you've got Lamont Hill, who reaches for the word cult and tries to flip the whole story on its head. And then Andrew Wilson cuts through everything to ask the one question nobody wanted to touch 6 weeks into the conflict with Iran. Is this actually working? It gets sharp, it gets personal, and the bishops, the Pope, and the Strait of Hormuz all somehow end up in the same conversation. Stick with me all the way through, because the back half is where the real disagreement explodes, and you do not want to miss how Andrew lands it. And before we get rolling, drop a quick note in the comments and let me know what part of the world you're tuning in from. I love seeing how far this little community stretches. Alright, enough from me. Let's get into it.
Well, joining me now to debate all this is the host of The Crucible, Andrew Wilson, Jack Posobiec, the senior editor at Human Events, who was at the White House this week, Joanne Carducci, better known as JoJo from Jersey, and Mark Lamont Hill, host of Bet News. Okay, let's start with you, Jack. You've been at the White House. It's a pretty shocking interview, actually, with Marjorie Taylor Greene in many ways, not least the revelation she was coming out with about her last exchange with President Trump on text about her son and so on. What's your reaction to that? I mean, there is a sense I'm getting that Donald Trump is lashing out at so many people that have either previously supported him or continue to support him, whether it's Riley Gaines or Georgia Maloney or Tucker Carlson or Megyn Kelly or Marjorie Taylor Greene, whatever, that the number of people he's lashing out at who were pro-Trump is suggesting that he's behaving erratically in a way that should be causing concern. What is your view?
Well, Piers, I mean, first of all, Marjorie Taylor Greene is someone that I consider a friend and certainly hope that everything is okay with her family, and anything regarding that should always be opposed the same way I've always said that I oppose any type of threats or violence. We had a situation, Turning Point USA, where Erica Kirk last night wasn't able to attend an event because of threats that she is receiving and other information that was coming to light from the security team. So that's something that obviously we always take very seriously. But when it comes to the president, President Trump has had public feuds with people for his entire career, even prior to his political career, whether it's tweets, whether it's in debate stages or in interviews. And so I think this is something that the voters quite largely have priced in to his personality. This really isn't anything new. It certainly doesn't seem new to me. It isn't even the first time he's gotten into a spat with the Pope. He was in a spat with the last Pope. He's in a spat with the current Pope. And I say that as a Catholic. So it's really just something that I feel like is part of sort of the cycle of Donald Trump, the cycle of President Trump, and something that the voters have looked at and said that they have priced in, that they say, you know what, we still want him to deliver for us, and that's why he won the popular vote.
But as a Catholic, how do you feel that over Easter weekend, he's out there trashing Pope Leo, he's out there, it's a few days afterwards, obviously, but he also posting memes of himself as Jesus and so on. I mean, it doesn't sit well with me as a Catholic, I have to say. I just think that, but politically, I found it odd. I mean, I saw so many MAGA people being interviewed who loved Trump, but were just really appalled by that. What did you feel?
Yeah, well, I also looked at it in its totality because I saw the Catholic bishops going on 60 Minutes and talking about how upset they were that the illegal aliens are being deported and that they're not filling the pews anymore. And yet they have this moral outrage for ICE and Tom Homan and President Trump because he's actually enforcing the border. And that means that the gravy train of Catholic charities and having these illegals that come in is winding down. And I think that that's what the president was actually responding to. And the fact that Pope Leo has, of course, been passively, aggressively entering himself into politics. He's been doing this for a while. He's entered the political field. And when I was in the Vatican City back at the conclave last year, I said, this guy is not a conservative. He is from Chicago. When he was a cardinal, he had a Twitter account that was extremely anti-Trump. It was anti-JD Vance. And CNN played my comments. And I said, look, I'm not attacking the guy. I'm just saying, calling it like it.
You have to understand something right out of the gate. Jack is the only person on this panel keeping his head while everyone else acts like the sky is falling. Piers sets it up as if a politician feuding with allies is some shocking new emergency, and Jack just calmly lets the air out of the room. When Jack said the voters have largely priced in his personality and that this really isn't anything new, that was the moment the segment should have ended, because he's right. None of this is a surprise to the people who actually cast a vote. And Jack closing with the line that's why he won the popular vote, that is the part Piers does not want to sit with, because it quietly reframes the whole story from a meltdown into a mandate. But here's the part that blows my mind, and it's where Jack goes from good to surgical. He refuses the bait about memes and the Pope. He zooms out. When Jack pointed to the bishops being upset that the gravy train of Catholic charities is winding down, he named the incentive nobody on that side wants spoken out loud. And let me give you context people skip. Catholic Charities has for years received enormous sums of federal money tied to resettlement work. That is not a conspiracy theory. That is sitting in public budget records. So when religious outrage suddenly appears the instant border enforcement tightens, you are allowed to ask whether it's principle or payroll. Then Jack lands the cleanest hit of the night. He said about Pope Leo, this guy is not a conservative, he is from Chicago, he is a liberal. Agree or not, you have to respect that Jack called it early, back at the conclave. That's not chasing the headline. That's reading it before it printed.
He is a liberal, and I think that's now coming to fore.
Okay, Mark Lamont Hill, welcome back to Uncensored. What do you think is going on with Donald Trump here?
So many things. First, I think the fact that people who normally don't dip into partisan politics are weighing in, and the fact that people who normally are even leaning to the right, I mean, even Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's saying, look, I'm still a conservative, as she just told you, but I have some legitimate gripes with the president. That tells you something here. This isn't
the weird thing, just on that note, the weird thing about Marjorie Taylor Greene is, when you look at the things that she has said, which have enraged Trump, they're all things that Trump, in the run-up to being re-elected, was espousing himself. You know, don't engage in foreign wars, particularly in the Middle East, full transparency on the Epstein files, etc., etc. It's hard to see why her staying on that message has enraged him to the point where he sort of excommunicates her.
Forgive me, there's a little bit of difficulty hearing you through my audio here, but there is a tension and a contradiction here. I mean, Donald Trump ran on a platform, if I understood your question correctly, he ran on a platform that's very different than the one that he is engaging right now in terms of isolationism, in terms of effectively saying, I'm going to make sure the economy is strong. I'm not going to meddle in foreign wars. I'm not going to mind anyone else's business. And I'm going to make sure that the country is back on a stable ground, as opposed to what happened with Joe Biden. That was his argument. I think people like Marjorie Taylor Greene bought into that. They believed in that. And now they're seeing him veer from his course. And like any cult leader, when they change course, the expectation is not that you have to reconcile that by leaving the cult. It's that you change your ideology, and that's what's happening right now. But I think the bridge that was too far for many people who identify as believers, people of faith, particularly Christians and Catholics specifically, is not just the contretemps with the Pope, but this Jesus image. I mean, there's just no way that you can look me straight in the face, Donald Trump, and say that you weren't engaging in what a Christian would reasonably determine as blasphemous behavior. And instead of just saying, hey, I went too far, I made a mistake, he doubles down and gaslights us and insults our intelligence by telling us that he thought that he was being a doctor. And in doing that, again, it seems like he's veering off the rails.
Now watch how fast the framing turns the second Mark gets the microphone, because this is where it gets slippery. And I'll be fair, Mark opens with something true. When Mark said even Marjorie is sitting there saying, look, I'm still a conservative, but I have legitimate gripes, he's correctly pointing out this isn't some left-wing pile-on. Fine, but then he takes a real observation and wraps it inside a smear, and that is the move I need you to catch. Because when Mark said the things that enraged the president are all things he was campaigning on himself, that's actually a fair point about consistency, and conservatives can sit with that honestly. We don't need to pretend everything is perfect. But then Mark reaches for the word cult. He said, like any cult leader, when they change course, you don't leave, you just change your ideology. And here's what people don't realize. The moment you call tens of millions of ordinary working voters a cult, you have stopped arguing and started insulting. You're telling regular people they're too brainwashed to think for themselves. That is not analysis. That is contempt wearing a lab coat. Then Mark closes with the line that it seems like he's veering off the rails. Let me break down why that phrase is doing so much heavy lifting. It sounds clinical, but it's pure narrative. It quietly turns a policy disagreement into a question about a man's mind, which is the exact same playbook the establishment runs on every leader it wants gone. We have seen this movie before. The difference now is that conservatives recognize the script while it's still rolling.
Yeah, Andrew Wilson, welcome to you, back to Uncensored. Always great to have you. A lot of our top comments on YouTube during this war with Iran have been, where is Andrew Wilson? So I'm glad we can allay any concerns about your whereabouts. You're here. What do you make of this war? I mean,
where else should I be, right?
Well, exactly. What is your view of this war? We're 6 weeks in. From where I'm looking, most of the things that we were told were likely to happen haven't happened. There's been no regime change. The people haven't risen up for a variety of reasons. And the Iranians have worked out that if you shut the Strait of Hormuz, you can pretty well cripple the global economy when it comes to energy. And by attacking the neighboring Gulf states, you can cripple their business model around tourism and entertainment and sport and so on. So I'm struggling to see any real victory here, although I accept the Americans and Israeli military have been pounding away in Iran and probably very successfully at the Iranian military. But there's kind of an asymmetric war going on here where you could argue Iran is winning the other side of this. What's your view?
Well, so we're not very far into this conflict. Trump doesn't have the Bush model.
And this is the part I respect the most, because Andrew flat out refuses to cheerlead. Everyone else spent the night arguing about memes and hurt feelings, and Andrew walks in and asks the only question that actually matters 6 weeks into a shooting war. Did it work? That's it. That's the adult question. When Andrew said there's been no regime change, he's pointing straight at the gap between what was promised and what got delivered, and every serious person on the right should be asking that. When Andrew said the people haven't risen up, he's naming the uncomfortable truth that you cannot bomb a population into loving you. That isn't weakness talking. That's experience. And here's the piece I really want you to sit with. Andrew points to the Strait of Hormuz, and people scroll right past it like it's a footnote. It is not a footnote. Roughly a fifth of the world's oil moves through that one narrow channel, and it has been the pressure point in that region for decades. Back in the late 1980s, American forces were already fighting running engagements just to keep those shipping lanes open. So when Andrew warns about what happens if it closes, he isn't being dramatic. He's reading from a history book the cable shouting matches keep skipping. Then he drops the line that should make every hawk pause. When Andrew said, I'm struggling to see any real victory here, and that you could argue the other side is winning this in its own way, that is not him rooting for the enemy. That is him refusing to call a stalemate a triumph, and that to me is the conservative instinct at its absolute best. Strength without illusions. Patriotism that can still count the cost honestly. You have to understand, real strength is not pretending everything is going perfectly. Real strength is being honest enough to ask whether the plan is actually working before you pour another year into it. Andrew did that on live television while everyone around him postured. That takes guts. So what do you guys think of this? Leave your thoughts down in the comments, please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.